You are listening to the Ready PDM Network.
This episode was brought to you by Eigenworks. Alan Armstrong founded Eigenworks in August 2008 out of his passion for and understanding of the unique perspective on buyer intelligence, captured in the phrase, the buyer as hero. By treating buyers as organizational heroes, Eigenworks gets deep insight to the reasons organizations make buying decisions. These win-loss insights provide Eigenworks clients with a significant competitive position in their marketplaces.
Are you ready?
Really, I think product management is about driving decisions in an organization and making sure those decisions are not only decisions made, but decisions executed. All the investors sort of paged through it with their jaws wide open, and they said, this is the kind of data we need. So what we really do with win-loss analysis is to understand the story of the buyer. The mind of the buyer, the buyer's lens is a phrase we're starting to use here.
Hello, Ready Product Radio heads, and welcome to another exciting episode of Ready Product Radio. This week's episode features a full-hour discussion with Mr. Win-Loss Analysis himself, Alan Armstrong. We talk about win-loss analysis, the buyer as hero, how to nail it before you scale it, and much, much more. Ready Product Principle number 7 is nail it before you scale it. I know a full hour is a big investment, but trust me, it will be worth it. Enjoy the show. So, Alan Armstrong, welcome to Ready Product Radio.
Thanks.
You and I know each other from the Toronto Product Management Association over many years.
Indeed.
But for our audience, do you mind giving yourself a quick introduction about what you're doing right now and your focus?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, Alan, it's good to see you again. And I'm here running this shop called Eigenworks right now. My background, as you know, was building products and managing products and marketing products and selling products, and ended up selling a company as well. And I think we've been at this about the same amount of time. Probably about 20 years.
Yep.
I started in a public company, and then I moved through, 3 different startup companies from sort of 50 people up to, in a couple of cases, up to, 350 people. And then the companies each exited, and a third company didn't get quite that big when we exited. And I found along the way that when we were trying to really, I think product management is about driving decisions in an organization and making sure those decisions are not only decisions made, but decisions executed. Right. And in order to make good decisions, you need good data. And so I found along the way that although there was a lot of data around, the sort of scarcest of data and also the most valuable data was, why is my product being bought? What are the motivations of my buyers? What's happening in the organizations where my product is being purchased or adopted? These days too, I think when you and I started out, we were in an enterprise software on-premise world where, if you sold the product, that was sort of game over, right? A lot of shelfware, right, out there. And these days with SaaS, companies can cancel their offerings at any time. They can cancel a vendor and move over to a different vendor. And so it becomes just as much about product adoption and what's emerging as a field called customer success. Right. As it is about the initial sale. But in no matter what part of that you're talking about, the mind of the buyer, the buyer's lens is a phrase we're starting to use here. The understanding the world through the lens of the buyer has always been the most valuable piece of it. So, I had an opportunity, going back almost 10 years to do a freelance gig. I'd done all my own win-loss analysis in-house, and I had a friend running a company, Paul Chen, out of Toronto, and his chairman on his board was Eric Goodwin, and those guys called me up. I was living in California, and they said, we need some help. And got a great product here. Feels like it's a great product, but it's not selling. And so can you just talk to, 10 or 20 of our buyers? And I did that, and I poured way more energy into it than I thought I would. So not an easy project, but, came back with something that was really tangible for them to execute on. And Eric Goodwin pulled me aside, took me out for lunch in 2005. And, put through the report that I delivered on the table at the lunch. I remember exactly where we were sitting, and said, he says, I gave this to the board of directors of this company, and it was called Fortiva. And he said, all the investors sort of paged through it with their jaws wide open. And they said, this is the kind of data we need. And he said, you're really good at this. This is a valuable service. Why don't you start a business doing this? And that was the inspiration. It took me a few years to kind of, get my courage up and get the resources together to actually launch a company. And I picked the perfect time, 2008. Yeah. Perfect time. Tanks. Company tanked.
Nowhere to go but up.
But been, I would say we've been at it solid since 2008. We've almost, I would say essentially 100% of our revenue for the last 7 years has been doing win-loss analysis, churn analysis, buyer sentiment, buyer lens kinds of stuff. And we'll get into some more of that later. And I just feel like I'm really, really fortunate, to have kind of been given that opportunity and went for it, and now we got a team here, running a lot of interviews and helping a lot of companies.
Great, that's awesome.
Yeah,
good. Well, thanks, Alan, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy day, because I know you're very busy, to speak with you. If it makes sense for you, there's really 3 areas based on your background that I'd like to focus on.
Yeah,
obviously, win-loss analysis you already touched on. That's a big one for you. I also want to talk about this notion that you banged in my head years ago, which is nail it before you scale it. I want to talk about the nail it piece, because I think that's probably the one that's not talked about as much as scaling. And then third, I'd like to talk about your move from corporate to running your own shop, because as you just said, that takes some courage and takes some planning, I'm sure, as well. So those 3 discussion areas sound pretty good?
Sounds great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well, let's start with win-loss analysis. So you've done a great job branding yourself for many years around this notion of win-loss analysis. I know you and I both have some background training in the pragmatic framework.
Yeah.
Win-loss analysis is one of those boxes. Brilliant, because they always say pick a niche when you're going to focus and start a business. But out of all the boxes on that grid, what was it about win-loss analysis that kind of piqued your interest and you said, this is something that I think I can go really deep on.
Right. In fact, I'm remembering back to. Maybe this was at the time I was banging something into your head, or you were banging something into my head. I don't know. And I remember I was speaking on the topic of win-loss analysis at a TPMA thing, and I remember you said, Alan Armstrong speaking about win-loss analysis. Surprise! What else is new, right? Okay, man. So what's the first of your 3 topics there? Which one do you want to pick up first?
So let's jump into win-loss analysis then. So
here's the thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of data everywhere, especially today. I mean, the world has changed insanely in the last 5 years, even. Yeah. We've gone from I'm sure when you and I started managing products, shipping CDs and then getting to downloads, and now we're largely into a SaaS world. Yep. But along with that, really amazing byproduct of that is an incredible amount of data that goes along with buyer usage. I walk around my clients when when I visit them and see the dashboards that the product managers are looking at.
Yeah.
It's not just operations anymore. It's like, PMs can get hardcore data on, why people are buying or not buying, or actually it's more about user behavior.
Yeah.
The thing that's lacking though, so we talk about two things. There's data and there's story.
Right.
And so there's a massive amount of data, way more than you and I ever had 20 years ago.
Exactly.
And now there's data scientists and, lots of people to help, sort of peel back the data and look at what's going on. But all of that data is great and I would never go without it. But what does it mean? What does it mean?
Yeah.
And so, we use the term win-loss analysis partially because that's the box on the pragmatic marketing grid, and it's a good name for it. But let's talk about what we do there. So what we really do with win-loss analysis is to understand the story of the buyer,
right?
And we are understanding the story of the company at which the buyer works. Typically we have the privilege to speak to one champion to understand a deal. And, as there are often many stakeholders. Yeah. And so it's sort of, it's understanding the decisions that are made through the lens of that person. And so I've got some diagrams on this that I'd love to share with you.
Sure.
And I don't know if you can throw it up on your website.
Yeah, we can definitely. Yeah.
So we talk about there's a Deming cycle of data, of measuring data, usage data and that sort of thing, and doing experiments. This is another thing that's happening now with lean startup thinking, and experimenting on your customers and your buyers, and then trying to ask them for something and see what they do, and that's great stuff, right? But there's another side of it, which is, who is this person? What are they doing? Why are they doing it? What is their motivation? What's holding them back from doing it? What alternatives are they considering? And I've been working on this a really long time, Alan, and I've boiled it down to the phrase "buyer as hero." And so, when we get on the phone with a buyer who's either not purchased something yet and sort of evaluated something and then went away, or has recently, put themselves or their organization through a, full-blown evaluation of many alternatives and made a significant investment. In either case, those individuals we engage with them as heroes in their own story. So I'm not calling them up and asking them the question, why didn't you buy?
Yeah, exactly.
What stopped you from doing this?
Yeah.
That sort of thing that would put them on the defensive.
Yeah.
Rather, I want to understand who they are. This is a bit of persona profiling, right?
Yep.
Who they are, what quest were they on? And putting it very much in the language of the hero.
Yeah.
What quest were they on? Look, you last job you took, or you look back at all the different jobs you took, and I'm sure for the people who are listening as well, you've heard this before. When one of your friends takes a new job, what do they say? New adventure. Yep. This is a new adventure. I'm on to my next adventure, right?
Yep.
This has been great. We did our thing here, and we went on our adventure, but new adventure. So, almost every significant purchase can be thought of as picking up some kind of equipment that's going to help you on your quest and your adventure. And if you look at it in that sense and try to understand the person and the quest, the adventure, who are the, there's all language around this, around the road of trials, towards, this is all stuff that's been explained by an author named Joseph Campbell.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. This is really resonating with me, Alan, because, total coincidence, but Joseph Campbell's amazing inspiration in my life.
Okay, really?
I saw him on a PB
PBS, yeah.
PBS program
Bill
in the
Moyers.
early,
Yeah.
with Bill Moyers in the early 80s. And I've kind of followed him ever since.
Yeah,
And
that's a great,
you
great
learn-
special.
Yeah, it's great. And I've got the VHS version of
Yeah,
that.
oh, wow.
To age myself a bit, but
Yeah.
it's such a perfect framework. And I have noticed a general trend that to connect better, we are going back to that story, back to that storytelling, because it just seems to be the universal human way
Human
of talking about experience.
Yeah.
That's great. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
like
the
that.
central thing that we're talking about, and we've got slides with pictures of Luke Skywalker on there with lightsabers. I've got a lightsaber here somewhere.
Yeah.
I couldn't kill anything with it, but it looks nice, and it really. It also makes it more fun. It makes it more human, because we're really, we interview people. This isn't a call center that we run here. Our people here have run product organizations, have run IT organizations. I'm working with a new person on our team right now who ran Manulife IT for a number of years, and has really been in that buyer chair. And, really, if you want to get the real story, it's really the only way to do it.
Yeah.
It's got to be a peer-to-peer. It's got to be a good, in-depth discussion. This isn't a scripted activity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now, when you're positioned in front of that buyer on behalf of your clients, like how do they position you? Is it something that you talk about openly to say that
Sure.
XYZ company wanted us to?
I'll give you a couple examples. So we've done one great example is one of our significant clients is Gainsight, so leader in the area of customer success.
Yep.
And so we do their CEO is someone I go way back with professionally, and when he joined that company, he was entrepreneur in residence at Excel, and before that at a different VC. And when he jumped on the Gainsight investment and became CEO, he immediately engaged us to start profiling. This gets a little bit into the nail it thing. It's like we got all this opportunity. We know the opportunity is huge, but we're not closing enough deals right now.
Right.
I call that the funnel with the fat middle. And so you got lots of interest. Maybe they're even phoning you back, but you can't get the order, right? So we would go in there and say, look, Gainsight's shooting the moon on this. They're not in this for the short term. I'm not here to close you on your business, but I am here to learn from you. And I want to hear what your challenges are as a person driving something called customer success. And when you looked at this equipment called Gainsight Service, what was it that worked and didn't work? And we're seeing like those guys are on a tear. You can sort of see what they're up to. I was at their user conference that they sponsor called Pulse. 2 years ago it was 1,000 people. A year before that it was 300 to 1,000. This year it was 2,000. I expect next year it'll be 5,000 people.
Crazy, yeah.
In San Francisco, and
hockey stick style growth.
And I think to some, they're well capitalized, they're well funded, they have a great management team, they have an excellent board, they've executed tremendously, but Nick calls us a secret weapon, because you can have all of those things, but you need to infuse those all of those management decisions and strategy and everything with a real deep understanding of what's going on, why people are buying, why they're not buying. And we've been with them through the life cycle. This is 2.5, 3 years later. And, now we're profiling for them, helping them do the scale it piece. But in every case, your original question, we go in saying, Gainsight is a learning organization. This is, a CEO who pays attention to every single discussion that we have with a buyer, has tons of discussions on his own. But, in some cases needs to, in order to get the real story, to engage with us to do that. So we position it very much up front. We're here to listen. We have confidential discussions, so they're not going to be revealed. We talk people into their opinions rather than trying to talk them out of their opinions. And that's what I'm there
good.
for.
Yeah,
right?
I like that.
Right?
I like that. That's good. Yeah.
I'm not trying to overcome your objectives. Objections. I'm just
not trying to save the deal.
No, none of that.
Yeah. So for our listeners that maybe are kind of in a corporate product shop, they can't, they're not going to be able to afford to use your services. Is there a basic set of, 3-5 steps that you could recommend for somebody wanting to kind of dabble their feet in the win-loss analysis?
Absolutely.
Approach themselves,
absolutely,
without giving away any of your secret sauce, obviously.
You know what? We want to give away all of our secret sauce. Actually, people ask me. People ask me all the time, how much of this should we do ourselves? And my answer is as much as you possibly can.
Okay, interesting response from some of the services.
There are some, we don't exist to convince people to do things they shouldn't do, right? We exist because they can't do certain things.
Right.
And also they're not as good at it as we are. We can't, and they're naturally a little bit biased. But you've been a product manager. I've been a product manager. We did our own win-loss analysis a lot of the time, right? So think of it this way, okay? So one of the biggest things when you're getting started doing this kind of buyer understanding is, in a way, you almost it's a real. I want to say you need the permission to do it, and at the same time you don't want to have to ask for it. So one of the big problems that people run into is that they say, well, sales won't let me call the customer.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay.
Very common, right?
Yeah. So I want to the first thing I want somebody to do as a product manager is get way beyond that. Okay, so start out. I've got articles on this as well. Okay. Start out by profiling deals that we lost 6 months ago. These are like, nobody
cold
cares
cases.
about. Yeah, totally cold cases. Do some cold cases and go find out what you can find out.
Yeah.
And the other thing you don't want to do at the beginning, I'm telling you all the things not to do, but
no, that's good.
Is don't piss off any salespeople, right?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's got to be really positioned as we're out here to learn. We're really out here to learn, and I'm not out here to fry any salesperson or the sales team or the marketing team or whatever. And ideally, you come back with enough information to say, okay, there's a broad spectrum of things we can work on here. I'd like to be able to study this more, and go from there.
It's not, here's my report to the president of the 12 ways that you screwed this deal up.
That's right, exactly.
And why we should get rid of you. Yeah.
And then, really, the next piece is, once you've kind of got buy-in to do this kind of work, is to, ideally study between 20 and 30 deals.
Okay.
That's sort of a magic number when it comes to qualitative research. There's research out there that says that, if you speak to 30 people in a population that's sufficiently uniform, and I don't mean identically uniform, but I mean, people in a market, if you speak to 30 of them, you're going to get something like, 99.7% of the themes that are represented by the larger population. Okay. Some great research on that. Yep. And, in our practice, we found that that's true. I mean, once we get to 30, we're darn sure what the themes are.
Sure, yeah.
But really the breaking point is sort of at around 20 conversations. If you can have 20 conversations, you're really getting, that's sort of the pragmatic number, or the practical number. And then, if you've got a very large, like if your deal size or your deal volume is low, and you do 20 conversations, you can be pretty confident that you know what you're doing. But if you have a large deal volume, like you're selling $200 a month product or something like that, your volume is probably so high that then you need to do some kind of closed-ended survey,
right?
Where you're polling the larger population. But the really interesting thing is, the return rates on those surveys are so low that you really have to have a large population to make that
exactly useful, and you got to give away an iPhone or something,
right,
to get them to fill it out. Yeah, good. So what's the next step then after you? So let's say you're able to find 20 or 30 deals.
Yeah.
What is it that you're you're asking about those deals? Or
So there's sort of two issues, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one is just logistically getting people on the phone, and I think it's worth, even if you can't afford anything, invest in sort of some administrative help to just set up those calls and schedule them, because that's actually a lot of work, and that's where a lot of people fail.
Yeah.
So it's worth a few $1,000 or whatever to do that instead of not getting the data. But then we talk about, and I'm in the middle of, I've published a little bit about this, but I'm in the middle of publishing what I call the discovery cycle in the actual conversation. So, really, your job as the interviewer or as the person profiling is to set the table for a conversation. Think about going out for lunch, or you think about having a conversation with a colleague. This isn't a friendship. It's a colleague. It's also somebody who's like, they're agreeing to spend the time with you. You need about 30 minutes. We find if you ask for 45 minutes to 60 minutes, you get your drop off and return rate is so high that we just ask for 30 minutes. And if you get really good at it, they'll give you more.
Okay.
They'll give you more than 30 minutes at the end of the call, or they'll agree to schedule a follow-up call or whatever. But don't ask for more than 20 or 30 minutes. But don't ask for less than that either. I've had people say, "Can you give me the interview guide for a 10-minute win-loss call?" And it's like, no, do a survey, because you're not actually going to get much in 10 minutes. So 30 minutes, and then I have this cycle that we've developed here that you go through, and the first and the cycle follows the hero's journey. Yep. And so the first is understanding. I think I've got it on our whiteboard here, which your users can't see, but your listeners can't see. But first is understanding your hero. Yep. Sometimes, Alan, you're not talking to the hero, right? You're talking to a gatekeeper or a herald or something like that. And so, first you want to find out who you're talking to and what their backstory is. I sometimes talk about the prequel, and then the episode. Right. Okay. And then getting into understanding, what was their quest, and when they picked up whatever equipment, I use this word equipment, the software, the hardware, the plastic cards, whatever. Yeah. When they picked that up and they looked at it, how did it fit into their quest? And just get them to talk about that. And again, it's like, you're not talking them out of it, you're talking them into it. Right. It's like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. What you say, that makes total sense now, right? Yeah. And that's like, tell me more about that, right? Yeah, exactly. Just get them, as much as possible to share that with you. And really sort of, there's a bit of Buddhism in here, but it's like practice non-judgment, and just like, that makes sense. Yeah. And then we talk about this second zone called the fundamental conflict. Okay. So, now, you were on this quest and you saw this product and you picked it up and you looked at it and you decided to set it down. And, and we found out that it was because, maybe it was too hard to use. Okay. So once you understood what that means, what does too hard to use mean? What do they do instead? Then you say, well, you get permission to ask a set of questions called what about. I call them what about questions. Yep. So what about, you said it was hard to use. I'm using a really trivial example, right? You said it was hard to use, but we also offer these training sessions. So I'm just wondering, did you have access to those? Were you exposed to those? What about the training sessions? And that opens up some, you can find tweaks in there. Another kind of what about question is interesting. People will say, well, we were all ready to go and then the budget got cut. Okay. And I'll say, well, what about, so the what about question there is sort of like, well, what about the quest? Like, you said you were going to reorganize your IT department so that you were aligned with the business units, and you needed some ability to track service requests. I'm just making all, right? Well, what about that business driver that was happening? What's going on there? Yeah.
These heroes don't usually give up when they hit the first barrier, right?
That's right.
The story is all about overcoming.
It is. And here's another, the Crusaders, right? Monty Python is making great movies about the Crusade. But, if the Crusade, wait a second, you were on a crusade, right, and, you got a note from the kingdom and they decided they were going to sell your horses because of budget cuts. I'm sorry, you're not on the quest anymore. But like, what about the quest, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the way I try, they're selling your horses. Like you think you're still on a quest. So what are you going to do now? So that's the second piece. And that's the fundamental conflict.
Okay.
And then we talk about the resolution. Then we get into the resolution. And, after you've really understood those kinds of tweaks that could be made and probed a little bit deeper into the actual workings of the organization and the person themselves, then you can get into the kinds of questions that I call what-if questions. So you have what about questions, and then you move to what if questions. The what about questions are sort of more diagnostic.
Right.
The what if questions are more imaginative and they're creative. And so now we can say, now what if, in our simple example from before, you said that the training classes were only on Friday afternoons and they were not on demand and they took 2 hours out of your day and you had to fly to Columbus to take them or whatever. What if, real simple, but what if we offered on-demand classes that were 30 minutes each, and you could sort of keep track of who was, and that's so you get to do some creative work to sort of shape an alternative solution to see whether some of the things, because when we talk to our clients, we're working with everyone from the CEO down to sort of the, director of product management and sometimes the sales leader. And they always have ideas of things they could change. I had a SaaS CEO saying, I could build an on-premise version of this thing, but I'm not going to do it unless it's going to change. Well, then what if it were offered on-premise? How would that change this equation? You can kind of test those things out.
Right. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So that's the basic cycle that you go through, and you're saying you can go through that in 30 to 40 minutes, or
I can go through that. I mean, we've repeatedly gone through it hundreds and hundreds of times in 30 minutes.
Okay.
It's took me longer than that to describe it to you, right? But. No, I mean we've gotten really good at that, and it's not always it's not always like a lot of work. Sometimes it's just a little bit of nudging in the right direction, the right questions, the specific questions, and getting that right. And I also there's another phrase that a consultant friend of mine, author Michael Papanek, is writing it. He's got a book nearly published right now. And he uses a phrase that I always love, which is you have to go slow to go fast, right? So the first, 10 or 12 minutes of the interview, sometimes it's only the first 5 minutes of the interview, is really going slow, right? And a friend of mine was listening. He says, wait a second, you got 30 minutes with this person and you want to ask them about their career history? Yeah. Like, get to the point, and
icebreaker,
you can't. You can't go fast at the beginning. You can't. You got to go slow before you can go fast.
Scare it off. Yeah, and because the sense when you were describing your cycle there was, I know if I put myself in the shoes, like you say, when especially if you're doing loss analysis, there's probably will be some initial defensive,ness, but the way you're approaching this, at some point I'm going to get the sense, hey, this guy, like I've forgotten about my deal already. This guy is really interested in what, my challenge is. And then probably, you have a hard time kind of shutting the person up. Right?
That's a good way to put it.
They're like, this is almost therapy for me. So let's keep going, right?
I've been called the deal therapist.
Exactly. Yeah, because
the buyer therapist.
Once people sense that genuine interest that you have, then I imagine it opens up from there. But you're right, you can't jump right to that. Unless it's somebody that you go back 20 years with, and it's like, hey,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. We hire a new interviewer. We need they need to not pretend they're interested. They need to be interested. Like, you actually can't fake that.
People
stuff.
Can really sense the difference.
Sure.
Yeah. Is all your stuff face to face, or can you do this on the phone as well?
Actually, all phone.
Okay, so that even makes it more challenging because you don't have the like you and I are face to face now, so we can assess body language. Hard. Even harder.
We do almost 100% phone interviews. I mean, it's just really expensive to go on site.
To
do a loss interview, but it's not that we haven't done on site or focus groups, but just.
You ever do Google Hangouts or Skype video or
No.
Audio's good?
Yeah, audio's good. I mean, believe it or not, the state of the art in, we're probing enterprise buyers, we're probing business buyers, and the state of the art is, not necessarily a video camera available or ability to get into a video meeting. I mean, sometimes they'll take the call on the drive to the airport.
You're right. You're setting the bar a little higher. Somebody says, "Oh, geez, then I got to brush my hair," and I hate the way I look on video.
Right.
Yeah. So you're setting up a whole bunch of obstacles you don't need.
That's well put.
Yeah. So maybe what you can do, Alan, is share some of these graphics with me, and I'll put them on with the episode. Sure. So we can get the visuals. So why don't we transition now and talk about the second piece, which is, like I say, after win-loss analysis, the next meme in my brain when I think about Alan Armstrong is nail it, then scale it. So I think there's a lot out there on scaling it, but I've always, even 20 years into my own product management career, it always seems to me that it's not necessarily 100% science, not 100% art. So in your experience, how do you, like working with your clients, how do you test or know when you've nailed it well enough? And because what I'm thinking, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, is if I try to scale too soon, I'm just going to waste a bunch of money.
Sure.
If I scale too late, a competitor might come in and eat my lunch. So how do you pick that timing of when to kind of turn on the fire hydrant, right?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the indicators is the shape of your funnel, right? I mean, I used this phrase earlier, and I'll say it again. The funnel with the fat middle, the middle-aged funnel.
The snake that just swallowed the rabbit.
Right. And demand generators are good at creating top of the funnel leads. And, people always say we have a sales execution problem. I think that's usually bullshit, if I may say so. Because salespeople execute. I mean, I don't know a salesperson who doesn't execute. And if they don't execute, they're gone. Yeah, right. Exactly. So salespeople execute. So usually what you have is a problem of what's called now in the lean startup language, product market fit. Right. Fit between the product and the market. Right. Okay. So, very early on, the founders, like the whole lean startup approach is that the founders need to be doing customer development alongside product development. And got some great examples out there of, most products have a certain amount of that done up front. The more you can do up front, the better. And it is good for the founders and the builders of the product to do that up front. And then you hit this stage where ultimately you've got to go to market with something, right? And once, as a product vendor, you become the seller and they become the buyer. All of a sudden, this totally different dynamic comes into play. You're the seller, they're the buyer, and all of a sudden we're in Venice in 1453.
Yeah, we formalized our roles.
Right, we become these archetypes.
On guard, kind of thing. Right. Touche.
Right, I will hide from you, you will hide from me, we will barter, we will do all these things, and that's fine. Like, that's just going to happen.
Dodge, parry, thrust kind of thing.
Yes. And so this stuff is as old as the hills, and it's not going to change. And so that's the point where the richness of the information about what's blocking you from making the sale decreases, and that's when you're in that sort of nail it phase. And so the approach that we take in that phase borrows from the Harvard Negotiation Project, the famous 1980s book called Getting to Yes, and the stuff is still current in terms of research.
I've got that on my bookshelf.
Sure.
Yep. A lot of people do, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so if you picture the triangle in that book, you have the buyer's triangle and the seller's triangle, and they both end up at the top of their triangles at what's called their positions. And they have divergent positions. And when you have divergent positions that are not close enough together, that you don't have a deal. Right. And yet you also, and so what what the Harvard project teaches is to go down to the level, to reset and go back down to the level of shared interests,
Right.
to look for shared interest in order to get to convergent positions, right? And build back up a mutual triangle to a convergent position. But that's a very difficult thing to do once you've set up the buyer-seller relationship.
Yeah.
So we call this stuck deal facilitation.
Yeah.
We'll go back
It's a great
in
term.
and we'll kind of walk down back
Step it
into
back.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, how do you know? How do you know when you're switching from nail it to scale it? You know, because you're closing more than you're closing more deals than you know how to close. You know that, you've got sufficient exposure to sales, and when they get into your funnel, you close them at a good rate.
Yeah.
And you can always improve that, of
Yeah.
course, right? But that can be sort of a, what do you want to call it, an inflection point.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like what you're saying there, the shape of the funnel, because as you, and I think about it in terms of value proposition, you fit to market, there's lots of terms, but as you get closer, and that's where I like your story bit too, right, in terms of the language and that the story that your or the quest that your product enables really matches the quest that your buyer is on. I imagine that time to revenue is probably much reduced. So that's where you're talking about the shape of the funnel.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a little unfocused, you get that bloat in the middle, right?
Yeah.
The kind of bulge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that fair? Am I reading you?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Well put. I wanted to take a couple notes there, in fact. And you, maybe the way to put it is, if you have stuck deals that just don't close, you're nailing it still.
Yeah.
If you've got a high loss rate, you might still be nailing it, but you're into a very competitive market. I mean, typically when you're nailing something, your problem is not other competitors. I think that's the key question. Is your problem? I was in I was down at Dreamforce a few weeks ago, and I stayed in the Valley for an extra week and visited a few CEOs, and I was with CEO of a company I won't name, but they they said, how can we benefit from this kind of analysis? I said, let me ask you a question first. Is your problem competitors, or is it buyers who aren't doing anything?
Yeah.
And the look on his face was just like, it was a combination of like relief that I had noticed his problem with sort of like, okay, now I'm getting, this is bedrock here. I mean, we got this great product. We got lots of salespeople, but we're not closing deals, right? Yeah. And that's when you're nailing it. And if your problem is competitors and hiring enough salespeople, right, you're into the scale it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
The third phase I'll mention is defend it.
Yeah.
So a lot of us have been worked on mature products.
Yep.
And they're subject to disruption. You can be in a disruptive product manager. You can be a product manager of sort of in the defend it phase. Yep. And that's got its own dynamics as well. We work with those companies that we talk about, we work with three kinds of companies. There's the nail it companies. We really have a lot of fun. Sometimes the budgets are tighter there, but we keep being exposed to cutting edge technology and techniques.
Very creative. We can shift the idea, the focus.
Yeah, we can have a huge impact, right?
Yeah.
And then the scale it, that tends to be more focused on competitive intelligence, staying ahead of competitors and so on. And defend it is like, companies that have kind of, crossed the chasm and gone through the big market phase, and now it's like, we're getting disrupted. We need to find out who those people are and why are they eating our lunch, and how can we turn that around? Yeah. And that we were down visiting a client in southern U.S. Just last week, and we talked to them about redemption. The theme of redemption, and taking a company that was once really great and may have kind of fallen off its mark, and now is being woken up by a disruptive competitor.
Yeah.
And that's good news. That's actually good news, because it gives the CEO, a burning platform, to use that term, or it gives a sense of urgency. Everybody's certainly paying attention,
energy,
right? You can't just phone it in anymore once you're getting disrupted by another competitor. So.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
So long as, in the defend it phase, we work with a number of defend it customers, and, we kind of become more choosy there, and we will do, initial projects with companies that seem ready to do what it takes, but some of those companies aren't really ready to do what it takes. And so
they might just be talking it, but you can sense that they're not ready to
take action. And really, we're not doing this for our, to line our pocketbooks. we don't, of course we're in business, we have to earn a living and so on, but we're really in this to help leaders of companies turn products around, or kill the market, beat competitors, improve their results. We want to work with people who
are committed.
Eigenworks helps people who can help themselves.
Yeah, I remember in the, you probably saw these too in the 80s. Anthony Robbins, when he would do his infomercials, he would say that up front as well, that part of his methodology is he'll interview you, and you have to convince him that you're really ready to change.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's got other people that he can be more impactful with. Yeah. So that's kind of, you're saying
satisfying.
The same thing.
In a sense, we're organizational coaches. We're sales coaches. We're product coaches. We coach our companies. We coach their CEOs. Yeah. And being a coach is pretty awful if the athlete doesn't want to train. Yeah. Oh, lots of talent there, but he doesn't want to get out and throw the ball, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
So doesn't want to do what it's going to take. Yeah. And so we want to work with those people who are ready to do what it's going to take.
Good. Well, listen, Alan, I want to be respectful of your time. So let's transition to the third piece, which I think will be of interest to our listeners, which is there's a lot of folks probably, like myself, been through the corporate career and starting to think about, okay, am I going to finish my career, working for companies, having JOBs, or am I going to go out on my own? You've had a brilliant product management career, director of a lot of great organizations, VP of product. You mentioned the strategy piece at Fortiva. Can you talk to us a bit about the process that you had to go through, both emotionally and logistically, to say, I really want to kind of go out on my own here and build something, as opposed to just quote unquote working for the man for the rest of my life, right? Mm-hmm. Or the woman in that case, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a big question.
Yeah.
For me, when I started Eigenworks, it was a life decision more than a career decision.
Okay.
I was working like everybody, 60 hours a week at the office, and I had been VP a few times, and was kind of like, well, what's it going to be next? I mean, am I going to actually go out and do another startup and maybe be a founder of a startup next time? And my decision was, my kids are the age that they were at that time. It was 2007. So my youngest was, was 4 at that time. My oldest was probably 8. And I wanted to be home more. And so, I started this out of we had a good sized home with an outbuilding that was great for renovated into an office. And started out there, and the sort of the garage. It was the garage, and it became my office. That was 7 years ago. I mean, now I'm in a different situation entirely. My kids are, of course, quite a bit older, and we have our own big, office here with employees and staff and a team and travel budgets and, accountants and all the other stuff. And it's a totally different thing now. I mean, I don't know if there's sort of I can tell you my story, but I don't know if there's really a general formula there. I think, it's not for the faint of heart, right? And it's not, it's not just a walk in the park. It's not just I'm going to throw my shingle out and I'm going to get some gigs. I think no matter what you do, you got to think of yourself as a product.
Yep.
You got to think of whatever you're going to do as a product, and you got to understand who your buyers are. Some of the best advice I had was, you ought to have like 12 months of cash.
Yeah.
That you're willing to spend.
Yep.
Before you're ready to start your own business, because you might just spend that. You might not. You might get lucky and keep that in the bank, and that's great.
Well, that's a good practice.
And another, again, I just mean a lot of people want to go out and they can do anything for customers. Like, I can do your roadmap. I could do your this. I could do your that. Great. Okay. All right. But that's a little hard to buy. Right. It's like
a general consultant.
Yeah. That's why I picked, something very specific that can be done over and over and over again. And we can get really, really good at it. We've developed automation. We use Salesforce internally. We have a whole bunch of automation tools. Everything that we do is in a repeatable way. So we don't have a software product that you can download or log into yet, although we've got something in the shop here that we're building. But we do have a very, very repeatable service.
Yeah. You've got the systems mindset.
Yeah.
And then you're hitting on two very common themes right now, which is niche for sure, right? And the second one is system. And it's interesting that you say that, because I was listening to another podcast, one of the Tim Ferriss's shows, and he was interviewing Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert.
Yeah.
And here's a guy you would think probably just this flaky creative guy or something. And one of the things they end up talking the most about,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So good point. So, but one of the things they ended up talking most about was how he takes a systems approach to everything he does. So in a sense, he's kind of like a product manager. He has the humor thing down to a set of rules.
Sure. Wow.
And he's basically like, I can engineer humor. These are the ingredients, and here you go. So I'm imagining that's important because it helps you keep your cost of goods as low as possible. Is that kind of the idea behind the systems thing?
I mean, cost of goods is one part of it. I want to say
and it could be your time and your effort, and that you're limited as well as a resource, right?
Certainly, no. I mean, that is our cost of goods. Our cost of goods is our people,
right?
But also, it helps us deliver the best service too.
Yeah.
I mean, like the work product that people get. The reason
consistency, hit it at a high level consistently.
We're just really good at this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can have very candid discussions with buyers that people are just, what people say, they're shocked.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of like, that was an astounding amount of revelation from this person who was totally closed off to our salesperson. Well, try to get good at that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So there's a whole thing going on there.
Yeah. Good. Well, let's talk a little bit. So we're here in your offices in Guelph, Ontario.
Yes.
You're still building it out.
Yes.
It's looking really good.
You have to come back when you have a camera crew and we have carpets.
That's right. But as you say, you've got, you probably got costs to finish this place, and you've got staff. Is that, when you look at the emotional side of that life decision, is that a big part of it, going home knowing that now you're responsible for this building and the staff that you have? And
it's certainly,
the pipeline versus, I guess, even on a corporate job, on the average week, you can go home and just,
sure,
it'll live or die whether you go to work the next day or not. Is that take some getting used to, having that kind of on your shoulders?
Sure, good question. I grew up in a business family. My dad had his own business for all the time I can remember, and that was always part of it. And frankly, one of the reasons I was sort of kind of hesitant to get into it myself.
That's right.
But maybe it's
I am
your father. It's your destiny. Together we can rule the neighborhood, not the galaxy. But anyways, I don't want to aggrandize myself too much, but there, each one of us has a journey, has a journey, and there is a hero. I mean, Joseph Campbell talked about that the hero's journey is a window into each one of our psyches, right? And how are we becoming ourselves? And I don't. I mean, of course I think about the overhead and the run rate and the burn rate and everything else, and I'm the guy who has to do that. I made a transition making the transition over the last couple of years and this year as well from being involved in delivery very heavily to trying to think about how do I really be the CEO of this company.
Exactly. Enable others to do some of the delivery. Yeah.
And we do. We have a good staff that does delivery, but I'm still involved quite heavily in some cases. Yeah. But it rather than feeling intimidating, actually feels kind of exciting, to be honest. I mean, we're in a really lovely city here called Guelph, Ontario.
It's gorgeous.
And, we're just an hour from Toronto. We're about 45 minutes from the airport, which means I'm about 6 hours from San Francisco.
Right.
And 90% of our business is in San Francisco Bay Area. We we had an office down there for a time. We may reopen something depending on things. More of a sort of sales and customer success.
Quite a different
spot.
Real estate pricing
investment. That's right. Yeah. So we sort of consolidated to build this. We brought the position that we had out there. We brought it in house here. It's kind of exciting. Like, we've got this thing. People love what we do. People love, getting stuff we get. We sometimes we track, how much people are reading what we're writing. We send out one report, and if it gets, 250 opens, that's exciting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, you can see our Kanban boards here.
Yeah.
I can show you digital dashboards that we have, and we're really trying to build a scalable service offering. And it's fun, actually.
Nice.
We've had a great set of customers. I feel like every time I visit a customer, I'm just so proud of my team here, and so re-energized by the thing that we actually do, which. Right. Look, I was a product manager. The Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Alan Armstrong too. It's AA, and I was a product manager, right? And the other thing is, Alan, before I was a product manager, I worked on a development team, and I watched this team. I was a technical writer. Yep. And I would get into the code with guys and look at the code. And I was trying to document what we were doing, and before it was released, and it was very hard to do. But we slaved, man. We slaved, and every product company works so hard to produce a product. And I worked on a lot of products that failed. And if I can be part of helping a development team target what they're doing, helping a sales team, a marketing team, product management team, all get on the same page. And by the way, on the same page is the buyer. If we can do that, if we can make people's work life, that much more effective and on target, that's a thrill. Yeah. And I want to do that in as big a way as we possibly can.
Yeah, that's great. So listen, just as we move to wrapping up here, there's a question I ask all of my guests. It's a pretty common meme on the internet right now, which is, okay, where you are right now, if you were to go back and talk to the 20 to 25-year-old Alan Armstrong, what advice would you give your younger self? Knowing what you know now, learning what you've learned.
Well, some of them I'm not going to say out loud.
Of course. Yeah, so what you're comfortable sharing.
Some of that advice. One of my best bosses. I've had a lot of really great bosses over the years. One of my really favorite people in the world is Larry Humphreys, and he took over Citraka in 2000 and sold it to Quest, and still at Dell Software now, which is about Quest Software, and he's one of the leaders there. Anyways, Larry used to say the most important trait in an executive is humility. My first reaction to when you said, what advice would I give the 25 years? I was like, go for it more, be afraid less, all these really sort of positive achieving things. And it's not that those aren't true. And I want to, I have kids now, and I'm encouraging them. And when I've coached, youth groups and soccer teams, and I'm always trying to, really get them to stand in their person and be authentically who they are. I also think that a real good dose of humility and just sort of like, life is about more than just products and just companies and whatever else. You got to live well, and develop relationships with those people you work with. I mean, if I had known I was going to know you for 20 years, I might have been nicer to you, I mean,
that's a good point.
But, relationships matter and they last, and reputations matter and you last. Another great boss that I worked for in the Bay Area is named Dick Williams. Mm-hmm. He said, your reputation takes a lifetime to create, and it can be destroyed in minutes.
Yeah, that's a good
seconds,
point.
Yeah. And so integrity is just so crucial, and the relationships that you build are so crucial. And it's not that you don't want to sort of step out and do bold things, because you do, but do it in relationship.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, that's good advice. So last question here as well. I try to ask this to everybody. High pressure, fun, but a lot of hard work. What does Alan Armstrong do to kick back? I know you're a jazz musician, or you play the horn at least. What kind of stuff do you do for?
A nice question.
To decompress, shall we say?
Yeah, I like the question. Actually, I've played jazz for almost 30 years. I hate to say it, 25 years at least, and it's more than 25 years. And I still really like that. But I'm maybe a little bit dried up when it comes to getting into a quartet and playing standards or jamming or whatever. And I've actually been one of the great things that I really love now is going to this music improv session. I go to once a week on Monday mornings, if you believe it or not. I mean, Monday mornings usually are just kind of like trying to remember what you do for a living and get fired up and get the team fired up and all that stuff. Go to the sales meeting, right? But I go to this music improv thing, and it's totally free form, unstructured, no key, no beat, no nothing, and but some really kind of magical stuff happens there. I guess more and more at this point in my life, I'm looking for ways to sort of stretch out in unstructured ways. Like I don't like going to a trainer who's gonna force me into a mold. I think it's much better for me to go out on a bike ride or a good walk or a good run or do whatever feels right in my body that day. And so the same thing with music. I mean, I'm really trying to just kind of look inside for the voice. And that amazing how that kind of permeates through the rest of my life as well.
Good. Well, Alan, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
I'd love to. Yeah.
And great location here. I look forward to coming back and seeing it when it's complete.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Take care.
Ready Product Radio is sponsored by Eigenworks. They specialize in win-loss analysis and offer customer development as a service. They'll extract candid feedback that will improve your sales approach, uncover competitive intelligence, and help you pivot as needed. Find out more at www.eigenworks.com. That's EIGENWORKS.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ready Product Radio, part of the Ready PDM network. This is when most podcasters ask you to leave a review on iTunes if you like the show. My only request is if you found the show entertaining, inspiring, or informative, please share it with a colleague or friend who may feel the same way. Also, note that the views expressed in this episode do not necessarily reflect my views or the views of the Ready PDM network. If you want yourself or your product to be ready, then keep your eyes on your markets, your ears to your customers, your mind on their experiences, both good and bad, and finally keep your hearts in your products. Until next time, thank you for listening.
You can contact us on Twitter at Ready Product Radio. That's RDYPRODUCTRADIO. And on the web at www.readyproductradio.com.
Jude, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.